Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 21. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Folks, welcome to the Infrastructure Committee today. You're very welcome. I'm going to provide a brief overview of today's business, and then we will crack on with it. The committee today will consider legal advice associated with the Department's proposals for subordinate legislation and further implement provisions under the Reservoirs Act Northern Ireland. Just to make people who are joining us aware, we have just done that, and it was in closed session, so we're not starting 45 minutes late. For the first 45 minutes, we have discussed that legal advice, and just as a summary of what we discussed, we will be seeking a little bit more legal advice regarding the implementation of that particular act. We will undertake formal clause-by-clause scrutiny of the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill. We will receive some oral evidence from departmental officials in relation to the Harbours Bill. We will also consider 4 proposals, SL1, for statutory rules which are subject to Assembly procedure, 1 proposal that is not subject to Assembly procedure, 2 SRs that are not subject to Assembly procedure, and 2 SRs that are subject to Assembly procedure. Just anyone in the public gallery, you are welcome to use mobile phones, but you should not either record or photograph the meeting. If members are content, I will proceed through the agenda. Are members aware of any apologies? I don't think there has been any today. I think we're all okay. We're all here in either physical or virtual format. Declarations of interests. Members have declared interest up till now. If an item arises during the committee that we stray into an area that you feel you should declare an interest in, you can do that at that time. That takes us on to Chair's business. The only Chair's business I have is to give my, and I'm sure the committee's very best wishes to one of the guys sitting in the public gallery. I'd love if the camera could actually flick to the public gallery. I'm not sure if that's even legal, so I might just have to keep talking. But the Dallo in the public gallery is called Joe. He has served this committee very faithfully, well before I joined the committee. And he has been a real asset. A Dallo, for anyone watching, is a departmental liaison officer. So his job is to go between the department, and in this case the minister, and this committee, and act as sort of conduit, especially for Michael and the committee business that we do. So hopefully Joe's embarrassed enough. He's not leaving for Canada. I think he's leaving for something electric. What is it? Can we say?
Electric trucks, yes.
Electric trucks, Joe? Electric trucks. And all the best wishes for the electric trucks. But I didn't want the moment to pass without saying we really do appreciate all the work that you've done.
Thanks, Joe.
And,
Thank you, Joe.
And all the best in the future. And I'm not going to embarrass Darren too much, who is trying to fill Joe's enormous size 11s. But Darren, you're very welcome in the committee. So that's Chair's business, and perhaps a nice bit of Chair's business for today, and I have nothing else. Okay, on item 5, we have the draft minutes at page 23 of our meeting on the 17th of June 2026. And also tabled at page 3, we have the draft minutes of proceedings of our meeting on the 23rd of June 2026, which was obviously yesterday. I just need to seek committee agreement that the members are content with the minutes and that they are a true and accurate reflection of those meetings. And if members are content, I will sign the minutes. Are members content?
Content.
Okay. So, then we have matters arising. Do members have any matters they want to raise from the last meeting? Okay. And that takes us to item 7, which is correspondence. And give me 1 second here. On page 34 is the correspondence memo. And you will note that we have a fair bit. As per usual, what I'll do is I will take us through the entirety of the correspondence and will flag up issues that I have noted. And if I go past something that you want to raise, do not panic, because I will bring everyone in to raise any item that they wish at the end. Okay, so this is just the stuff that I picked up and some suggested actions. Again, feed in to anything that I mentioned, but I will bring anyone in at the end to raise anything off the core. So we're on page 34 for the memo, and at page 38 is a response from the Minister to the committee's correspondence requesting an update regarding the road signage and speed limit on a section of dual carriageway, the A26 Frosses Road at Station Road. And I just need to seek committee agreement to forward that on to the constituent, or to the member of the public who raised that with me. Our committee agreed to do that.
Agreed.
Okay. Page 40, we have a response from the Minister for our to our correspondence to her, seeking an assessment of the impact of service delivery from the contingency planning envelopes in the absence of an agreed budget for 26-27. and subject to any other proposals, I would want to seek committee agreement to note this and consider an oral session on the budget with departmental officials in September. Our committee agreed to that. Okay. Page 44, we have a response from the Minister to the committee regarding the residual waste disposal facility at Mollusk. I don't want to get into particular detail about this one, but I do want to flag up a couple of issues just from it. So it's on page 44. It's quite a detailed reply. It not only details with the residual waste disposal facility, but also the other cases that the department have that are on their desk, as it were. These are the regionally significant planning applications that we have discussed during the planning and inquiring. And just to note a couple of things off it. The actual Mollusk decision, I'm not getting into the rights and wrongs of any of these, it's not for us, but just to note that that was initially approved on the 13th of September 2017, and it is still going back and forth. The next one, which is the ARC 21, again towards the bottom of that page, just to quote a line, the application was received in March 2014, and the decision to refuse was made by former DOE Minister in 2015. Since then, the application has been subject to a number of JRs. The application was deferred back to the department in May 23, and so on and so on. The only thing I have in terms of what I would like, and if we can go back to the department on this, and it's more for my interest than anything else, just on that one, the residual, the ARC 21 one, the Minister said their number of JRs. I'd like to know how many JRs. Maybe we just look that up somewhere, but I would be quite keen to know how many JRs that have been subjected to over the life of its proceeding through various committees and now sitting with the department. You'll see all the rest of them there as well. If anyone wants to make any comment on that, I will take it. But Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. It's good to see this letter, albeit a week or so late, and it links in with the original request that we got from around the ARC 21 project that you mentioned. I think just given the significance of it, it affects around half the population of Northern Ireland. I certainly would be keen to let them have their say, I suppose, and learn more about where it is at the minute and a bit more about the project. So I know they had requested to do a deputation to the committee.
Okay. Yeah.
I understand. So I would like to propose that we could consider that possibly upon return in
after recess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, I'd be happy enough with that. I suppose my interest was just how long these things take, and people will have their own views on waste, but certainly my understanding from some of the chat even yesterday, and I don't have a large harbour, but I know that Sinead and others were chatting about Warren Point and the smell and so forth, just in terms of the exporting of waste. This is obviously trying to deal with our own waste, so there's lots of things swirl around that one. In that case, short of anyone else, wanting to come in this one, the two things would be, for me, I'd like to write back to the department and ask how many JRs that one, the ARC 21, has been subjected to or has gone through. Would committee be agreed then to Stephen's proposal to have these folk in to talk about where this is?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay, well, let's do that then. That's fine. Okay, there's nothing else on that one. Right. On page 65, we have correspondence from the Finance Committee providing the recent public expenditure outturn and forecast data. Just to seek committee agreement to write to the department for detail on the reasons for underspend in relation to Peace Plus money and the consolidated fund extra receipt. Our committee happy enough with that?
Intent.
Okay. Page 69, we have correspondence from the Committee for Finance providing updates from the Department for Finance on cash flow forecasts and spend profiles. Just need to seek committee agreement to note and consider in relation to the oral session on the budget schedule for September. Our committee content. Page 78, we have a report from the Northern Ireland Audit Office on flood risk management in Northern Ireland, a very recent one. Michael, do you want to just brief the committee on whether you chatted with the PAC clerk on this and where we sort of generally are on it?
Yeah, I have engaged with the PAC clerk on this. A decision hasn't been made by that committee as yet, whether to release it from primacy.
That's okay. Well, that's a waiting game, so look, we'll keep an eye on that one. I know people were, Andrew in particular, is keen to get his hands on it. As we know, PAC get first dibs, so we'll keep an eye on that one, and at some point they'll make a decision on that, and once they have, we'll bring it before this committee and seek a way forward, if the committee are happy enough with that. Great. Page 28, we have the sustainability report from the Northern Ireland Fiscal Council. I would encourage members to have a read at this. It's quite long. And it's quite detailed, and I've got through some of it, but it is printed out and it's sitting up on my desk. So at this point, I would just seek committee agreement to write to the department for details on DFI spending savings plans. Sorry, our committee agreed to that.
Agreed.
Page 190, we have correspondence from the member of the public regarding concerns for funding of the community transport sector. This was one that came into me as chair, so you'll see it in the pack there. Basically, so that I wasn't the purse holder, but we have had some interest from community transport. We are waiting so patiently for the review, which was due a while ago, and apparently might be with us in September. So on this one, I just need to seek committee agreement to write to the department to inquire as to the status of the community transport funding, and if we could tag on to that also the current review that has been promised on several occasions but never yet seen the light of day. So if a committee are agreed to that.
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, so I'll take us to anything else that people want to raise, and if you want to just indicate to me off the core member on 34, I'll take any items that committee members may have. Justin, you're first in.
Thanks, Chair. Item 7.3, where we wrote to the Minister seeking her assessment of the fact that there is no agreed budget and how that's going to impact her department and her department's ability to deliver transport services and to deliver on capital programs and projects. Obviously, she sent us a letter back, but with I think the lines that needs further explanation are: my department's contingency planning envelope for 2026-27, having the short term allowed for continuity of vital service and further progression of the capital program. However, without an agreed budget, very difficult decisions will be required to continue delivery of these vital services. For my department, this will include prioritisation of service delivery and capital schemes for progression. So she's going to decide what services can continue in public transport and what capital schemes can progress. I think that's very worrying. I think as a committee, we should be very alarmed by that reality. I think we should certainly, I propose that our committee writes to the Minister to express our concern and our alarm at this reality, and ask her what action she's taking to agree a budget so we can protect public transport services and allow capital programs to proceed.
Okay. Nope. Thank you, Justin. Look, I think that's reasonable. I suspect I know what the Minister will say, but I think, Justin, you're right in terms of that is part of our role, is scrutiny of this and the implications of spending decisions or non-spending decisions. No one else is indicating to me on that. Militia.
Just given the very fact that a budget hasn't been agreed, it's unlikely that the Minister is going to be in any other position than to give what we do know will be the likely response to that. And it's incumbent on all other parties in that as well too, to ensure that the budget is agreed, and this all becomes a whole lot clearer then where does it even our Minister in Infrastructure is going.
Look, I understand your point, Militia, and look, in many ways you're right. We don't have, it's a factual thing, we don't have a budget, and there's a whole range of reasons for that. Again, notwithstanding that, I think it is a legitimate question for Justin to answer. He is, Justin, I appreciate you're on this committee as a committee member. Obviously, your party's in opposition, which is slightly different from the rest of us. I think it is a legitimate question in terms of scrutiny to ask. What are the implications? Whether we get an answer to that is a different matter. But essentially what you're asking is what will happen if we don't get an agreed budget. Michael, do you have a summary of what Justin's proposed?
Yes, to write to the Minister raising concern about the services and service savings, the impact on services and capital projects of the lack of an agreed budget, and to ask what action the Minister is taking to secure an agreed budget.
Yep. Members agreed? Agreed. Okay. Okay, Justin?
Sure.
Okay. So anything else off the core member on 34 anyone wants to raise? I don't want to hamstring anyone. Okay, that's fine. Okay, well then what I would propose is that we note the rest if members are agreed. Okay, that takes us to item 8, which is the Water Sustainable Drainage and Flood Management Bill formal clause by clause scrutiny. At the initial point, I just need committee agreement that this session is Hansarded. Our committee agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Take you through a few bits of table of papers. So at page 7 of table of papers, we have the clerk's memo on the SUDS bill and the formal clause by clause scrutiny. I have here, I think. Yeah. I'm going to put the question in each clause as set out below, and so I'll just sort of walk everyone through it and seek committee agreement as we go through each clause. Just to remind members that yesterday's informal clause by clause session, we did have some discussion regarding the letter from the Minister, which we received on the 19th of June. And in that core, the Minister has committed the Department to bring forward a number of potential amendments to the bill in relation to clauses 1, 2, 3, 6 and 15. And these amendments are intended to address requests previously made by the committee. I would want to note two things in that. First of all, I think this committee's done a good job on this bill, and we have subjected it to a level of scrutiny that I think we should be able to stand over. And also then just to note as well that it would be incongruent for me not to at least welcome the agreement from the Minister in relation to the concerns that we have had. I also note it came very late in the day, but that notwithstanding, we do have it now, and so the Minister has agreed to a significant amount of what the committee has asked. The committee informally agreed that notwithstanding the fact that it has not yet had any sight of the draft amendments from the Department, the Minister's response has provided a level of assurance regarding clauses 1 and 6 subject to the proposed amendments. And these include amendments clause 1 to provide inclusion of social media as a means of advertising a temporary ban under clause 116b 2 and 5, and amendment to clause 6.6 to make relevant provisions subject to draft affirmative assembly procedure. Members have welcomed the Minister's commitment to bring forward these amendments, these the other amendments 2, 3 and 15 in line with committee requests around this, relating specifically to the SUDS approval body, the offences provisions and the commencement arrangements. However, it is our view that we do not have yet sufficient detail regarding the departmental amendments to reach a definitive position on these clauses yet. So the committee has essentially informally agreed to reserve our position on 2, 3 and 15 and request that the Minister will provide draft amendments for all 5 clauses by the 2nd of September 2026. We have already got draft amendments in place, draft committee amendments in place, should the departmental amendments to the clauses that I've just mentioned do not cover the committee concerns around this. And obviously, if that's the case, we will table, if the committee agrees, those amendments to the bill as it reaches fourth stage. I will now move on to what we call formal clause-by-clause consideration of the bill. And I will just go through each clause in turn and ask members regarding each of those clauses. So, clause 1, water use temporary bans. Is the committee content with clause 1, subject to the proposed departmental amendment to include social media in the means of advertising a temporary use ban in clauses 116b, 2 and 5? Clause 2, sustainable drainage systems regulations. Is the committee agreed not to take a position on clause 2 until the department have submitted draft amendments for committee consideration? Clause 3, section 2 supplementary. Is the committee agreed not to take a position on clause 3 until the department has submitted draft amendments for committee consideration? Clause 4, meaning of sustainable drainage system. Is the committee content with clause 4 as drafted? Clause 5, structural sustainable drainage systems consequential amendment. Is the committee content with clause 5 as drafted? Clause 6, flood protection grants, domestic buildings. Is the committee content with clause 6, subject to the proposed departmental amendment that regulations made under clause 6.6 be made by draft affirmative assembly procedure? Clause 7, flood risk assessment and management. Is the committee content with clause 7 as drafted? Clause 8, drainage works environmental impact assessment. Is the committee content with clause 6 as drafted? That was clause 8, wasn't it, Michael? Yeah, I'm just checking. And I was just making sure everyone's paying attention. That was clause 8. Is the committee content with clause 8 as drafted? The scope of regulations under 7 and 8. Ask members, is the committee content with clause 9 as drafted? Clause 10, regulation of Article 161 amendments. Is the committee content with clause 10 as drafted? Clause 11, unlawful sewer communications remedies. Is the committee content with clause 11 as drafted? Clause 12, adoption by sewage undertaker, removal of restrictions. Is the committee content with clause 12 as drafted? Clause 13, supplementary, incidental, consequential, transitional, provision, etc. Is the committee content with clause 13 as drafted? Content. Clause 14, interpretation. Is the committee content with clause 14 as drafted? Clause 15, commencement. Is the committee agreed not to take a position on clause 15 until the department has submitted draft amendments for committee consideration? Agreed. Clause 16. Is the committee content with clause 16 as drafted? And the schedule. Is the committee content with the schedule as drafted? Okay, excellent. Okay, that sort of ends the committee stage. We still have the report to get signed off. Just to make members aware, that doesn't finish us with the SUDS bill. When we get back in September, we will be waiting to see what amendments OLC provide in terms of those issues that we have raised with the department, and in particular the clauses that we have highlighted. So in September we'll come back to this, but at that stage we will have, I would imagine, OLC will have drafted the clauses, so we have sight of those. At that point then, we can consider whether or not we are content with those, and we let those go forward as departmental amendments, or if we're not, we will then table for fourth stage, if the committee are agreed to it, the committee amendments that Liz has already drafted for us. So that takes us to item 9. which is a whole series of SL1s. So you can pin your ears back for some reading. SL1, the Upper Dunmurry Lane, Belfast Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. Page 195 is the clerk's memo. Page 196 is the SL1, and pages 199 to 204 are documents that relate to the SL1. The statutory rule is subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon an area of 193.4 square metres of road leading to numbers 141 to 147 Upper Dunmurry Lane, Belfast, commencing at a point 85 metres southwest of its junction with Cluna Park, extending for a distance of 20 metres in a north-easterly direction. The abandonment has been requested by Apple Orchard Construction to facilitate redevelopment in the area. The bed and soil of the area to be abandoned is owned by the Department for Infrastructure, and following the abandonment, the land will be disposed of and incorporated within a new development. The committee's call for views closed on the 16th of June 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Content. Item 10, SL1, the Draft Weight Restriction Amendment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 206 is the clerk's memo. At page 207 is the SL1, and at pages 210 to 213 are documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is not subject to procedure before the Assembly. The proposed rule will prohibit vehicles weighing in excess of 7.5 tonnes from using Craigierogan Road Mollusk. The prohibition is being introduced as information signs currently displayed declaring the road unsuitable for HGVs are being ignored, making it necessary to legally formalise the weight restriction. Vehicles are accepted from the prohibition in certain circumstances. The committee's call for review closed on the 16th of June and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the SR? Item 11, SL1, the Mayfield High Street Newton Abbey Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. Page 215 is the clerk's memo, and at page 216 is the SL1. At pages 219 to 222 are documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon an area of 32 square metres of road and footway at Mayfield High Street, Newton Abbey. The proposal has been requested by South Bank Square Limited, which owns the bed and soil of the area of land in question. The abandonment of this road and footway will permit a change to the layout within a housing development. The committee's call for review closed on the 16th of June 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the SR? Item 12, SL1, the Bradford Square, Belfast Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 224 is the clerk's memo, and at page 225 is the SL1. At pages 228 to 233 are documents that relate to the SL1. The SR is subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon an area of 49.331 square metres of Bradford Square, Belfast, commencing at its junction with Tomb Street and extending for a distance of 7.52 metres in an easterly direction. The abandonment has been requested by Belfast Harbour Commissioners to remove public rights of way as a portion of this road no longer exists. The bed and soil of the area to be abandoned is owned by the Department for Infrastructure and Belfast Harbour Commissioners. The area has been incorporated within a multi-storey car park, and following the abandonment, the DFI land will be disposed of to Belfast Harbour Commissioners. The committee's call for views closed on the 16th of June 2026 and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the SR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the SR? Item 13, SL1, the Bankmore Street, Belfast Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, formal consideration. At page 235 is the clerk's memo. At page 236 is the SL1, and at pages 239 to 242 are documents that relate to the SL. The SR is subject to negative resolution. The rule will abandon two areas of former road and footway at Bankmore Street, Belfast, contained within the car park at Charlotte Street, Belfast, totaling 509 square metres. The proposal has been requested by the Department for Infrastructure to facilitate the transfer of land to Belfast City Council, who are owners of the bed and soil. Following the abandonment, ownership and responsibility for the land will be transferred to Belfast City Council to be incorporated into the car park. The committee's call for views closed on the 16th of June and received no responses. No specific issues have been identified with the ASR as drafted. Are members content with the proposal for the statutory rule? Item 14, SR 2026-98, the Meanan Square Londonderry Footways Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 224 is the business office letter. At page 245 is the made order. At page 251 is the Examiner of Statutory Rules report. The rule is subject to negative resolution before the Assembly. The ESR has reported and not raised any observations or issues in respect to this rule. Are members content with the SR?
Content.
That the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2026-98, that the Meanan Square Londonderry Footways Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, and has no objection to this rule. Item 15, SR 2026-104, the U7487 Vicarage Road Portadown Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 260 is the business office letter. At page 262 is the made order. The rule is subject to negative resolution before the Assembly. The ESR has reported and not raised any observations or issues in respect of the rule. Are members content with the statutory rule?
Content.
That the Committee for Infrastructure has considered SR 2026-104, the U7487 Vicarage Road Portadown Abandonment Order, Northern Ireland 2026, and has no objection to the rule. Item 16, SR 2026-114, the Road Races Mid-Antrim 150 Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 268 is the business office letter. At page 269 is the made order. The rule is not subject to Assembly procedure and is not required to be laid. There have been no changes to policy content since CSL 1 was considered by the Committee for Infrastructure on the 27th of May 2026. Are members content to note the statutory rule?
Content.
Item 17, SR 2026-117, the Roads Speed Limit Number 2 Order, Northern Ireland 2026. At page 274 is the business office letter. At page 275 is the made order. The rule is not subject to Assembly procedures and is not required to be laid. There have been no changes to policy content since the SL1 was considered by committee on the 27th of May 2026. Are members content to note the statutory rule?
Content.
Okay. Right. Do I want to take a couple of minutes before we take the oral evidence? That's all that we have left. I know everyone else has take 2 minutes.
Agree to suspend.
Can committee suspend for say 3 minutes? Well, let's make it around 5 minutes, shall we? And enjoy ourselves. And we will come back in 5 minutes. A comfort break, and then we will hear departmental evidence on the Harbours Bill.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Welcome back to the Infrastructure Committee. We are on item 18, which is the Harbours Bill. For committee members, I'll take you to page 279, which is the clerk's memo. At pages 283 to 345 are documents that relate to the Harbours Bill, and at page 11 are of table papers are the proposed call for evidence. I'd like to welcome Sean, Adele and Royan, who are all officials from the Department for Infrastructure to committee today. I need in the first instance just to get committee agreement that this session is recorded by Hansard. Are committee agreed? Okay, brilliant. I want to thank the officials for coming. Obviously the bill went through second stage yesterday, and there was some really, I thought, very helpful debate on the floor of the Assembly around some of the issues that I suppose we'll be grappling with. But in the first instance, I'm going to hand over to Sian, who is most likely to lead in this because she's sitting in the middle, and the officials who sit in the middle tend to lead. So
have to remember that for next time.
Yeah, no, for next time. Start with Royan, and then we'll see where that takes us, shall we? So anyway, Sian, the floor is yours. You can make an opening statement, and then you will obviously expect some questions from members.
No problem at all. So good morning, Chair and members. Thank you for the invitation to brief the committee on the Harbours Bill. The bill was introduced to the Assembly on the 15th of June and, as you know, passed its second stage yesterday. And I thank the committee for its support for the bill during yesterday's debate. As you're aware, the bill will amend existing legislation, the Harbours Act Northern Ireland 1970, the Ports Northern Ireland Order 1994 and the Harbours Northern Ireland Order 2002 to modernise the legislative and governance framework for our trust ports and harbour authorities. As the Minister said yesterday, and members recognised, the bill will enable the trust ports to operate more efficiently and help to strengthen their contribution to the regional economy. A key objective of this bill is to update governance arrangements in response to the Office for National Statistics' current classification of trust ports as public non-financial corporations. While this classification has no legal impact on statutory powers, function or ownership of the trust ports in Northern Ireland, it has significant practical implications. Trust ports borrowing currently requires capital budget cover from the Department, placing port investment in direct competition with departmental projects for funding. The bill seeks to address this issue by removing certain levers of government control, with the aim of encouraging the Office for National Statistics to review the classification of trust ports. A successful reclassification would break the link between port borrowing and departmental budgets, enabling greater financial autonomy for the ports. Given that the second stage debate was just yesterday and you are familiar with the key policies and clauses, I intend to cover these only very briefly. So Clause 1 repeals the power of the Department to compel the sale of a trust port, and this is an important step in protecting the trust port model. Clause 2 repeals the Department's power to issue directions to trust ports in the exercise of their statutory functions. This step reinforces the principle that responsibility for strategic decision-making rests firmly with ports themselves. We recognise the points made yesterday in the Chamber about the need to balance this with appropriate safeguards, and these points will be addressed in the secondary legislation. The remaining 3 clauses amend the Harbours Act Northern Ireland 1970 to better align our legislation with our counterparts in GB. These changes include a limited power to issue harbour directions in the interest of marine safety, allowing harbour authorities to delegate certain functions while safeguarding key powers, expanding the purpose for which the harbour orders may be made, and broadening the scope of commercial and investment harbour-related activities, including removing the requirement for ministerial approval. The bill will be supported in part by subordinate legislation, specifically 4 harbour orders covering the ports of Belfast, Coleraine, Foyle and Warrenpoint. This will address the appointment of the board to the trust ports and provide ports with further enhanced commercial powers, while ensuring that activities remain aligned with port-related objectives and protect the long-term financial sustainability of each port. So I hope that was helpful, and of course we're very happy to address any questions that the committee members may have.
Thank you very much, Sian, for that briefing. Just in terms, I have a couple of questions, but I wanted to just pick up on something that you said that you might be able to flesh out a little bit for me. During your presentation, you used the phrase certain, and it was with regard the context of the ONS and the capital cover. We use the phrase certain levers of government control, that the bill was reducing certain levers of government control.
Yeah.
Are those levers financial control? Are those levers governance? Are those levers procedural or directorial? Perhaps you could just sort of, talk about that.
Yeah, well, they do relate to, as I said, there are sort of 2 parts of this process around that will enable the reclassification. There's the primary legislation, and then there are the secondary, the statutory harbour orders as well. So some of the clauses within, and specifically, I think clauses 1 through 2. Just 2 of them relate to the removing the controls. So, and those are set out in the legislation in front of you. Then there's an issue in relation to at the minute the minister appoints all of the board, and we have to make that the minority of the board. So that's picked up in the secondary legislation. So I think those are the main
points.
They're
the main 3. That when ONS reclassified the trust ports in 2005, they were what they raised as controls in relation to our ports and why they became public.
Okay, so that's interesting. And also, essentially, I suppose the 2 aspects to my question. One was just because there was that piece yesterday that members are just kind of grappling with what level of individuality will this legislation give to the harbours in terms of separating themselves out from the department. But I suppose really in the answer that you gave there, the driver behind this, I think everyone would probably accept, I think possibly exception of one member of the Assembly, but everyone would accept that actually providing the harbours with greater, if we call it financial autonomy, essentially borrowing against assets in essence. When you step behind that, the ONS are essentially saying there's 3 things, if I'm picking you up right, Adele, in your answer, there's 3 things that has to happen in order for us to allow the harbours to have that level of financial autonomy, allow them to borrow, allow them to develop, and so forth. So Are those three things that you mentioned there, are they the key things that the ONS have said you have to rectify, so we reclassify and then you can borrow? Is that a summary argument, or?
Sorry, that isn't quite how they put it. They explained at the time why they reclassified it, so
Okay.
we know why they reclassified it.
Yep.
They haven't said, no, this is
Yeah,
what you
they
need to do. But we also have the examples where other ports have been reclassified, so we can see what changes they needed then.
Yep.
But I think it's important, and the Minister highlighted this yesterday, there are still other powers that will remain in place, so it's these specific ones.
Okay, that's fine. Is the department concerned, or have you identified that as certain sort of departmental powers are pulled back, do you have any concerns around that? Are there any sort of risk mitigations that you're putting in place, or are you content at this point that actually X, Y, and Z needs done? This has to happen to enable progress. I mean,
Yeah, I think that's, if we seek to be able to remove the link between the borrowing, these are the things that need to change.
Yeah.
But we are confident that there are safeguards. As I said, it's mostly in secondary legislation, but things like, I think it was Andrew mentioned yesterday in relation to Doverport, where they have members of the board that are there for sort of community interest. We actually have that already, because we, unlike a lot of the other trust ports, actually have councillor members on our board for that very reason. And back in, I think, 2002, they actually upped the number on each of the boards, because specifically they recognised the importance of that sort of local accountability. So we actually have those in place already. I think in terms of that specific example of Dover, it's important just to point out that they actually were not one of the ones that were reclassified. They are still public corporations, so I wouldn't draw the analogy too solidly, but on that specific point about the engagement, we recognise that, and that is there. So I think we are comfortable about the balance.
mm-hmm. Okay, that's fine. Leads me on to my final question. You mentioned the change in the board and how that was going to change. You also mentioned this phrase, the minority of board members. Can you just explain to the committee how that board is currently composed, and how, following this legislation, that board might change?
Yeah, so obviously each board is different and it's set out in terms of their own specific legislation, but generally speaking, there is the chair, there are a number of non-executive members, and then there are councillor members, and at the minute, and the numbers depend for each of the different ports, but they're all appointed by the Minister at the minute. Mm-hmm. The intention would be, but again it's in secondary legislation, so we're still working our way through this, that the Minister would definitely appoint the chair and likely appoint the councillor members, and then the other non-executive posts would be for the port.
Yeah.
So we would still have, the Minister would still appoint the chair, importantly.
Yep.
And we would still, the Minister would appoint the local representation piece, which we feel is the important lever around making sure that that's there as well. Okay. So that is the balance that we're likely to put in the secondary legislation. But as I said, we're drafting it in parallel at the minute now.
Not quite there yet. Okay, so I have one more follow-up, and then I really will stop asking questions. So if my understanding is right, so post legislation, the Minister will appoint the chair, will appoint the local representatives. You would call them community, but they're likely going to be councillors, or certainly in the case of in Belfast. Just past that, then, Shan, the appointment of non-execs. Yes. I think you sort of said there that was going to be, the ports themselves. Yep. Will that be through a public appointments process, or would that be through a internal recruitment process by the organisation itself?
I don't know yet. I think we've had to look at some other examples about how we might do that.
It would likely be the board.
Okay.
So it would be the chair and.
But it wouldn't be through the public appointments process as such.
No, because if it's a public appointments, again, we're back into ONS classification territory.
Yeah, so it's likely just, Royanne, it's likely to be a competition.
Yes.
Organised by the
port
itself. Okay.
And we would envisage that the chair would be sitting on that board. Usually there would be an independent person as well.
and some information. No, that's fine. Yeah, that's okay. I
But
understand.
this is all stuff as well that we can put in guidance around the legislation.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. John.
Chair, thank you. Folks, thanks for coming along. Hope you enjoyed the debate yesterday. I thought it was really positive and worthwhile, which is nice to see in the floor of the Assembly for a change. We're all in agreement for once, which is great. We did discuss last year, I don't know if you were there, Sham, were you all there? Whenever we were at Belfast Harbour, and we discussed effectively what we're discussing again today. We hadn't seen the bill itself, so thank you for bringing that forward. The first thing I just want to get on the record is from yourselves, and I raised this in my contributions yesterday. There is some speculative concern out there that this is a backdoor privatisation. I do think, for the record, it's important to say why that's not the case from the reporter's point of view, and why this doesn't lead to that, just so that can be proven for those that are sceptical about this.
So this is purely about the accounting classification. The model itself isn't changing, and in fact Clause 1 actually works to protect the model, so there's no sense of that at all. It's absolutely not what it was about, and I think the Minister made that very clear yesterday.
Yeah, that's good to have on the record. In terms of the engagement, obviously, in terms of stakeholders, there's not a great deal, and the public will be looking on going, what does this really mean? But for Northern Ireland PLC, it will hopefully have really good economic benefits. The ports, the stakeholders themselves, the ports, they've now seen the legislation, they knew the intent. Have they come back to you with any response so far to say anything they'd like to see added or tweaked, or are they content effectively with how it's been drafted?
So they're effectively content. We have one query in terms of with Foyle, just in relation to an old piece of legislation that we're working through with them, but it's not a fundamental issue in terms of the legislation. I think it's important to say that the ports themselves have been very engaged throughout this whole process, but inevitably, it's always a balance between, what we need to do in terms of the ONS classification, what the ports may wish, and, what we have to do to protect the public interest. So, but no, look, they're all broadly happy and have been thoroughly engaged. I do think, you mentioned the stakeholders, but certainly there is engagement as well, but you can see from the response to the actual review at the time that there is engagement from the likes of, port users and communities, as you would expect.
Yeah, well, that leads me on nicely. I think there were 60 responses to the consultation originally. Could you just give us a brief summary of it? On 60 of them? From memory, though, I haven't looked at it, it was all fairly positive, and it was maybe technical in response, a few queries.
Yeah, they all were very positive. We did have, I think it was maybe about 25 that seen that place to be a way of getting their concerns about other issues of other ports. But the ones that did answer the questions in relation to the consultation were all supportive for extending the powers, allowing the ONS reclassification to go ahead, and allowing the ports to develop, make themselves larger and more for the economy and the community. So.
The Minister was clear yesterday, and others were, that while we acknowledge and we remiss not to highlight the issues and the community concerns around Warren Point, that this bill itself is probably unamendable to cover the concerns there, to cover that. But you did mention secondary legislation. Do you think there's an aspect within the secondary legislation that could have that community engagement that we talked about to try and strike that balance, and how would that look?
Well, so I think that the main point we would see around how to bring in the voice of the community is through those councillor appointments. And I think, as I said earlier, that isn't a usual trust port thing. That is something that's very specific, to Northern Ireland, because at the time in 2002 it was recognised of the importance of that local voice. So certainly in terms of, Minister, we don't intend to change anything, but we can look to how we strengthen the that sort of competition as such, to make sure that it's very clear about what the role of the councillor appointments are. I think that would be useful. And I think there was a point earlier, it's not just Belfast that has the councillor appointments, they all have councillor appointments on the board. So that is one way in which we can do it. The code of conduct is code of practice. It does talk about, and the guidance around master planning, for example, and you've seen this with Belfast. The role of engaging with the community is highlighted as being incredibly important. So, the ports do understand this, and it's something that we would like to sort of reiterate in terms of our expectation. So hopefully that answers the question.
No, it absolutely does. We'll look forward to seeing that. Obviously, as a committee, we'll play our scrutiny role, as we always do, and we'll try and make that as effective and efficient as possible, and hopefully we'll see this process and get rolled out before the end of the mandate. I don't see any reason why that won't happen.
Great.
On the back of that, though, the ports will be keen to know. The department then has the process of the awarding the individual harbour, removing the individual harbour orders to unlock the reclassification. What's the time frame for that post Royal Assent? And does the secondary legislation come first, and then that? It could just give us an idea of where that might take us.
Look, it's really important that we get the primary dealt with in this mandate, because we have a slot, and there's no guarantee in terms of having slot in the next mandate. So that is unashamedly why we have been prioritising that work.
Yes.
But in the background, we have been starting work on individual harbour orders, and we've been working with the ports on those. So the intention is we need to get the primary agreed first, and our hope is that the sort of final stage around Christmas. Mm-hmm. The issue is that once that's then kind of solid as a drafting platform, that we can then finalise the secondary legislation. Okay. That then goes through the affirmative process, so you will have an opportunity to scrutinise those again, with the hope that, given a fair wind, that this will be all done within the mandate. But the issue is, in terms of the secondary, that we do have the fallback of being able to pick it up in the next mandate. We don't have that luxury with the primary.
Yes, exactly.
So hopefully...
Oh, that's good. Thank you so much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, John. And look, I said on the floor yesterday, obviously this is executive legislation, so it will get primacy in this committee, and we will, I think even the Minister, I think, praised the committee yesterday in terms of some of the things that she said, that we do take our responsibility seriously, but we are also a committee that is absolutely committed to seeing good legislation in Northern Ireland that benefits everybody. Militia, you're next.
Thank you, awful like. You're all very welcome, and you'll be glad to know, I think John asked nearly all the questions that I intended. But notwithstanding that, just again, you have confirmed, we'll say, that the ports will remain as trust ports as opposed to them being free ports. And in terms of, we'll say, your engagement in that with the different governing bodies at the present time in relation to the ports, what appetite is there for change?
In terms of the government, other government departments? Well, I suppose the main one that we have engaged with has probably been DERA in relation to their role around the fisheries ports. So they have been cited on the bill, and we have taken their views on board. We are working with DOF in terms of they are our link to ONS. We can't engage directly, so we've been making sure that the Department of Finance is aware of what we are doing, so that when the time is right, that we can get that in the ONS work programme. So those are probably the main departments we've engaged with. Obviously, we're engaged with, the likes of DFE in relation to general issues in relation to like renewables, energy, and all of that as well, generally on the ports. But that'll be our main engagement. I think everybody is, they see the good work the ports are doing, and they don't want, government to be sort of constraining. I think somebody mentioned hamstrung, in terms of the Assembly yesterday, in terms of that greater role they can play in terms of the economy. So I think there's general support.
And how do you feel, or could you explain to us how it is that this will bring the ports up to speed with all other ports and other jurisdictions and that as well, and to what extent it is that will then assist them in contributing to, we'll say, the all-island economy? Yeah,
no, well, I think that if you look at where they are now, it constrains their ability to borrow and utilise their ability to borrow to do more. So they are very restricted in terms of that. And I think, we've said this before, but I think it's worth reading. It's not just borrowing from us; it's any borrowing has to, is linked to the accounts. So we've seen examples in terms of, like, if you look at Belfast, I think they're one of the biggest port, in terms of Ireland, and second biggest cruise port, I think, in the UK. Like, our ports are incredibly beneficial, but this just unlocks that further in terms of what they can do and the development they can do. So I think it's a very positive move, and I think that, again, it was Andrew, I think, spoke yesterday about, the knock-on consequences of the investment in the trust ports, and the way that might link into other harbours as well.
Yes, we can all look forward to better days ahead.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Militia. Andrew, who's clearly the favourite of the officials today. 3 references to one committee
Don't
member.
Don't stop me, Chair.
No.
That's terribly unfair.
No, it's because the sound.
I'm trying to throw them off balance here.
Sorry, we couldn't hear very well in the assembly yesterday, so I had to go back and listen to it, which is why I was sort of very familiar with the comments.
Duly noted. All work. Listen, I suppose really, as I tried to say yesterday, the whole gamut of things, everybody sees the benefit of the trust, the need to do these things, and yeah, just the general, as I said yesterday on the record, happy to see it progress and all that goes with it. But it would be remiss of the committee and the chair and myself if we weren't sort of scrutinising the different aspects of it. Yeah. So, I mean, that's just to take that in the sort of the context of things, really. Knowing that this is sort of an ONS, Office of National Statistics, sort of how they classify, if that makes sense. I suppose, is a department, dare I say, convinced that by making these changes it will lead to the reclassification of the trust ports in the eyes of the ONS, because again I'm not terribly sure how the ONS works, but again, will that lead to reclassification which will allow the financial economic development of said ports? I mean, can we be sure of that?
Well, obviously the ONS has its own autonomy, so I can't say for definite, but we are doing all of the things. We have specifically addressed the points of why they reclassified it in the first place. We've looked at other examples in terms of where they have reclassified. So we have done, in terms of reasonableness test, we have done all we can. But at that stage, we have to trust that that is the due process will follow, and that is what will happen. We don't have direct engagement, and they won't engage until the legislation is in place.
It's difficult then, I presume.
Well, but I think it's not something that we are particularly concerned about.
Okay. Yeah.
It's not something like we have seen the examples, and we are working on that basis. Don't see any reason why it would be a different outcome.
Yeah. And again, without catastrophizing as such, but it's a trait that I have sometimes. I mean, that's my baggage, not yours. What is the worst case scenario? What is the, if it wasn't reclassified? I mean, is there a contingency plan, or where that it just isn't reclassified and we just continue as is then?
Well, we don't see that as a realistic risk at the minute. Because we are doing all that we can. I think the important thing is that certainly, insofar as the secondary legislation, we can further amend secondary legislation relatively easily if that was an issue, something there. But it isn't a realistic concern in terms of the things that we have seen happen with other ports. There is precedent in place, where other ports have been reclassified. So.
You mentioned secondary and subordinate there. Again, we've sort of come through another process of which secondary and subordinate legislation has, caused us as a committee concern, if that makes sense. I mean, so I suppose at this stage, there's nothing on the face of the bill coming down the road that should be on the face of the bill. Or are we going to, and this subordinate and secondary legislation it's okay to do it as such, if that?
Well, certainly, we work obviously under advice from drafters, and we'll see, and we have been advised that generally speaking you want to keep the smallest amount in primary, so that because secondary is easier to amend. So we've very much taken a sort of trying to keep the primary as short as possible, and to put the main parts into the secondary. Appreciate that we're asking you to consider the primary legislation like saying the secondary, and that is something we have got early drafts, and we're happy to find ways to reassure about what is going to be in the secondary legislation if that is helpful. We want to be as helpful as we can be, but again, it will come to you in time, as part of that process for you to consider as well.
Again, we have touched on it about the accountability and the transparency.
Yeah.
And we continue, it's not so much to flog a dead horse, but again, the more times we address it, the more times we can say, or give an opportunity to say. So I mean, how will this bill directly, express public accountability and transparency? And I suppose my question here is, by reducing the public appointments in the councillors to majority appointment by the Harbour. I mean, how does that sit? How does that go with sort of enhancing the public accountability and transparency? And you know, these questions will continue. You know,
and we would, you know, that's absolutely fine. I think just to reiterate, there is no sense of changing the number of appointments. The councillor appointment minister would still make those. So that is one of the bits that we plan to keep. So the minister still makes the councillor appointments. So that is seen as the local representation. Yeah. We see the link in terms of the councillor appointments in terms of providing that direct engagement and representation of priorities within the area. So all of that will stay. And that will be, it's the other members of the board that the board would, or the port would appoint, if that makes sense.
Would there be a prerequisite on the minister to appoint councillors from the direct area?
Yeah, they're from. Sorry.
They've been from the direct DEA, for example.
So at the minute, those are things we can look at in the secondary legislation. At the minute, it's just from the council area.
But yeah.
And in terms of the criteria, like there are a number of criteria where we're looking for people with specific interests, and the local community representation is one of those areas. We can look at areas of strengthening that, for example, but that is all in the secondary legislation. But I think importantly, there is no sense of us changing anything to do with the numbers of councillors, the fact that would still be the minister appointing those. Mm-hmm. That is all the bit that we want to keep for the reasons you mentioned.
Yeah. And just will, you know, I suppose a reference to the fact that we are an island economy, and I get the importance of, you know, well, we just have to ship stuff in, so that's it's part and parcel. But I suppose in some ways, well, how will this allow ports to become more competitive? I suppose the point being, yes, we're an all-island economy, but in the case of Warren Point, for example, you look across Carnforlough and there's another harbour there as well. I mean, how will this help our sector grow as an economy? Well, I suppose that is envisioned. Is that envisioned in this?
So I think part of it, so if you look at, and you know, like it's better that, in fairness, I presume the ports will be in as part of this process, and it's better for them to speak on their own individual plans. But you know, examples that I can reasonably foresee are where ports wish to invest in their own decarbonisation, for example, that requires significant investment that at the minute they can't borrow because we can't facilitate that. So you know, if you look at even just requirements under legislation, and actually just even their own operating costs and things, there's an opportunity to bring them down by decarbonising, but that involves more investment. So you can see those, that's just one. They will be much better at explaining it themselves in terms of what they can do, but that is just one example where I can see that as being a reasonable thing that they would want to invest in.
No, that's thank you, Chair.
Are we enough, Andrew?
Why? No.
Okay, so I haven't had any other indications in terms of this. Obviously, this is where it all starts for this committee, and as I said to the Minister yesterday, you know, we do want to work with the department. Holy moly, there he is. It's just the yellow hand goes up, Justin. I'm glad I didn't miss you there, brother. The floor is yours.
Go ahead.
Sure, thank God you didn't miss me. I'm so happy about that. Listen, thank you very much for your evidence. Obviously, in principle, very broadly supportive of the whole premise of this proposal. Just concerned, I'm not sure to what degree it has already been touched upon, is concerned that the Minister and the Department can potentially be allowed to relinquish the reins of proper scrutiny of our ports, and is that anything that you would have any issues with or thoughts around?
Well, I think in terms of, we've probably addressed some of those points earlier, that you know, this is a balance. We don't feel that you know, we've still got a lot of the controls, such as, for example, the Minister appointing the chair and the councillor members. The councillor members will still be appointed by the department, and we understand the role that they play in terms of providing that local accountability and input. A lot of, you know, there are only some of the powers that are being taken away. We don't see those as, you know, those relate to the ONS classification. We still retain a lot of the other powers, and we'll be looking to strengthen things like the code of practice, in terms of providing guidance about our expectations.
Okay, it seems a little bit aloof in terms of where.
Oh, not at all. I think the important thing is that a lot of this is, as I said earlier, is in secondary legislation, so it isn't directly covered in terms of this bill. And I've said that we're happy to share our initial thoughts around the secondary legislation to provide that reassurance. I'd said earlier in terms of my opening comments, we very much recognise all the points that you raised yesterday, but I think it's just that you don't necessarily see it in the primary legislation because it's all in the secondary legislation specific to each port.
All right, folks, thank you very much for your efforts. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Justin. As I was saying there, we got Justin in the end. The committee wants to work with the department, wants to work with the minister. Again, it's a fairly technical bill, a wee bit like the SUDS one that we've just finished, and I did make my views as the committee chair pretty clear yesterday that actually, the quicker we have responses to things, the easier it is for us. And I obviously would have to reflect that we did get the indication from the minister, I think it was on Friday, regarding the SUDS bill. I know I'm on something, but I'm making a sort of procedural point. That's quite late. That's only one working day before we have to do informal clause by clause, and then 2 days. So that's late in the day for a committee to try and get to grips with those aspects. So I made the point in the chamber. I would make the same point to you as officials, that actually that engagement piece and that back and forward piece is how a committee and a department works best. So certainly we're up for it as a committee, and I certainly hope that over the period of months in the new term, we can get this, as I already said, this will get priority from this committee, and we will work hard on it. And
I think, just for the record, we're very keen to provide as much information as we can, as proactively as possible. So we're new to this as well in terms of, but we will be doing everything we can to facilitate speedy passage. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot, Shan, Adele, and Ryan.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you. See you soon.
That's great. Just for members' interest, in case you haven't guessed, I'm not sure if I referenced it earlier, Stephen Orm's going to join us as the bill clerk for the Harbours bill, and excellent. Seems very good official. Okay, so we have a stakeholder list. Sorry, is there any actions from that? I don't think there was, Michael.
Not that I picked
No.
up.
Okay, it's fine. So just for members to note, the stakeholder list provided by RAISE, which will be used for the call for evidence, which is in your pack, and that will enable engagement with all stakeholders during the consultation period. I just need to seek committee agreement on a 10-week consultation period that will run from today until the 2nd of September. And obviously the proposed call for evidence, to have committee agreement.
Read, Chair.
Okay. Just need to seek then agreement that RAISE will be invited to brief the committee on its research paper at our meeting on the 9th of September. Our committee agreed.
Agreed.
And just then to inform members that a draft timetable for committee stage scrutiny, including proposals for an extension of committee stage, will be presented at next week's meeting. That's just an FYI to everybody. We'll look at that next week. That takes us on to item 19, which is our forward work programme, which is at page 347. Just on that, and just to get committee's mind on this one as much as anything else, the forward work programme, it's worth having a look at it, colleagues, which is on 350. And those are sort of the outstanding issues that we're looking at and things that we have to factor into committee consideration, etc., etc. There are a few things that I picked up that I would kind of be quite keen to fit into September if we can. I'm going to pick up on a few of them, and none of them are particularly controversial. But I would like an update on the review of Class C licensing. Now that's from the department and was due in spring 2026. Okay, so again, these are things, if I can get committee agreement, then the clerking team will go away and work their magic in terms of getting the department in, and they'll have no excuses because they're getting plenty of notice, about 2.5 months worth. So that was one I picked up to get in early doors. The second one is the outcome of the Phase 2 community transport, which I referenced today, the transport review that has never appeared. And every time we ask about it, it's put back 3 months. So I would like to get officials in, and maybe if they feel that they're going to get some difficult questions around this, we might win their hearts and minds over the summer to try and get this thing actually completed and out. So I'd like to have officials in regarding outcome of Phase 2 community transport as well. Then there is a motor insurance one that's meant to be scheduled in as well that we had on the long finger, and I have written down here motor insurance in Northern Ireland FCA. So again, this is something that came up yesterday in terms of the GDL stuff, and I know that John's very interested in this sort of stuff. I am too, and I'm getting more interested. I would maybe want to seek committee agreement that we schedule in for September, both the FCA and the ABI, and get them in here and ask a few questions around this, because we have seen that demographic, that work towards the demographic breakdown. But actually, as the Minister referenced herself yesterday, the insurance payments are extremely high. I think that's something we probably should have a look at. So again, committee agreement, if we can try and get the FCA and the ABI in early doors in the new term. Final one from me then is car parking operators, and it's amazing the amount of constituents I now have sort of coming to me saying, is there anything you can do about this? I've got one in such and such a car park, and do I have to pay this, and so forth. I'm sure we all get those. I would like to invite the representative bodies of car parking operators in Northern Ireland in here. Some of those might be DFI have a role, councils have a role, I think still. We have some private individuals. We have a lot of debt management companies in England we maybe see letters from. So perhaps if we give the authorisation to, again, the clerking staff just to have a look at that and maybe see what they can come up with in terms of getting some of those folk in to give evidence, if the committee are agreed.
Absolutely.
Okay, no, that's all I had from that. And look, so then, subject to that, just to seek committee agreement to proceed with the evidence sessions as set out in the forward work programme and reflect any decisions taken today, which we have taken one on. Our committee agreed? Agreed, Michael?
If I just
go ahead.
Update the committee on that, just to say that APCO is coming in we've asked APCO to come in on the 16th of September.
Oh, good.
To brief the committee anyway.
Car parking, man?
Car
Yep.
parking, yes. And there had also been a previous committee agreement when having the Class C taxi licensing to come in to actually have the taxi sector in as well.
Yep.
But it might be a bit of a squeeze to get both in for September. So if committees agreed to do that in October.
Best efforts, absolutely. Yep. Committee agreed?
Agreed.
Yep. Okay. Is there anyone apart from APCO we'd want to have in on the car parking? Are there any other bodies? I mean, you can go in and have a look at it. Maybe they are the people, but
this is slightly different in that the APCO is to come and talk about the contract they have with the department, as opposed to private operators.
Got it.
And that other stuff.
Okay. That's fine. Okay. No, that's all right. So, do we have committee agreement to proceed with the evidence session set out in draft forward work plan? Reflect any decisions today?
Agreed.
Okay. Any other business? Does members have any other business? Date, time, and location of next meeting. Just before we get to that, so next week definitely worth having just a look at what we're going to be doing. It'll be next Wednesday, but we have to sign off the committee report and also the planning inquiry and the recommendations on that. So we've got those two bits of business. That will be the last meeting before we break. So just to let members know that the next meeting will take place 10 a.m. on Wednesday, the 1st of July, in room 29 on Parliament Buildings. And with that, I can adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Committee room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29.